Hello, and welcome to the Happy Author Podcast with me, Dorothy Coomson. I'm a multi-award-winning best-selling author, and I'm here to help demystify the publishing world for anyone who writes books, wants to write books, or just has a love and passion for books. On today's extended episode of my podcast, I speak to Jennifer Doyle, Fiction Publishing Director of Headline Books. I first met Jen when I was at my previous publisher, Penguin Random House. Jen worked in the marketing department on a couple of my books and we clicked. When I was looking to find a new publisher, Jen was my first port of call. Jen is my new editor, so she's my main point of contact at my publishers. When people think of books, they think of the editorial department, and this episode should give you some insight into how this important part of a publishing company works. Jen also explains what she's looking for in a book, what you can do to improve your chances of getting published, as well as how to have a better experience when you do manage to secure a publishing deal. Jen and I often laugh a lot when we talk, so do be prepared for a bit of silliness amongst the vital information. Jennifer, or Jen, whichever you prefer me to call you.
Jen is all good. Most people know me as Jen.
Okay, great. So we'll stick with Jen for now. Okay. First of all, can you tell me what your job title is and what it actually means?
I can. I'm Fiction Publishing Director at Headline. And essentially what I do is oversee our fiction publishing. So I run a team of editors who are all kind of buying and publishing for the list. I have overall sight of what we decide to publish and how we decide to publish it. I'm essentially responsible for the profit and loss of that area of our publishing. And I actually also, as you well know, I publish my own list of authors as well. So I'm an editor for a handful of authors alongside that.
So when you say a list, does that mean there's separate parts of Headline?
Yeah, so it's divided into imprints, and we have a kind of a fiction offering which runs across different imprints. So Headline Review, Tinder Press, Headline Accent, and Eternal. And we also have our non-fiction list as well. And we have an imprint called Headline Home, which is cookery and lifestyle. And we have Wildfire, which is actually a mix of fiction and non-fiction, but it doesn't sit under me. So yeah, we have a range of imprints. So I tend to refer to the fiction list as a list, even though it kind of falls under various parts of that.
What do you think anyone wanting to get into publishing, being traditionally published, needs to know? Because I know there's all these you can find writing tips and stuff like that, but from your end, what do you think when people are trying to get published, what do you think they should know, that there are things that they might not have thought of?
One of the things I would say is that there's no kind of one size fits all for publishing, and publishers have to treat each book differently. So it's very hard to compare kind of like for like, and kind of context is everything, I think. So, you know, if you're coming from an author perspective and what people are thinking about on the other end, the reason I say context is everything, because it completely depends on, you know, the type of publisher, the type of imprint you're looking at, what else they're already publishing, and therefore, you know, do they have a slot for you? Because we can love the book so much, but if we don't have the appropriate slot to publish a book, then we can't necessarily take it on. And it also affects what we might pay for something, depending on if that makes sense, depending on how much risk we can put on something. What else? I think one other thing to think about, and I know it's hard to think about because sometimes I find it overwhelming as a publisher, just how many books are being published. I mean, you know, hundreds of thousands each year, and as you know, there are only so many slots in the retailers, in the shops. And so that's just something that we have to bear in mind, that it's you know, it's you know, you were talking earlier about, you know, whether or not you can make your millions from being an author, and I suppose the realistic picture is that there are a lot of books, and some of those work, and some of those work really well, but there are challenges to that, in terms of, you know, space, and kind of competition, and, you know, all of those things. So that's not to be negative, because the positive side of that is you can also reach readers directly in a way that you never have been able to before. Yeah. So, you know, Amazon is, you know, or digital platforms in general, you know, you can affect your sales through, you know, metadata, through digital marketing, through, you know, talking to readers directly and bringing them to your book. So there's more opportunity there, but it's a tough landscape sometimes. And so publishers are thinking about all those things when they're thinking about who to take on. And, you know, the response that you get from a publisher, it's just worth bearing in mind that it's not necessarily to do with how much they like a book or how much they think a writer is good. Because, you know, we always wish that we could publish more, and we always wish that we could publish the books that we love, but there are just lots of other things that come into it. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it does, in the way that that people don't often take that into consideration when they're sending off a book to be published. When trying to get traditionally published, I don't suppose it occurs to them that it is a business as well, and that's the unfortunate part. It is a business. It always has been a business, but we have this idea of publishing being something other than that, and it is an art form as well. You know, books are art, and they are creative, and they are very much so, and that's a wonderful thing about them. But it is a craft, as in there is a business side to it as well. And
absolutely. And essentially, you know, the other thing to think about is that, well, I was going to say we're gamblers as publishers. We're gamblers because, you know, you can never guarantee the success that you're going to get, because there's no, as you say, there's a craft to it, and we know the things that we can do to enhance things, you know, through the relationships we have, through the distribution, through our kind of expertise in, you know, marketing or covers, or, you know, all of that. But there's also an element of luck, I think. You know, there's always that perfect timing thing that happens when you get a big success, which, you know, you can't quite put your finger on.
Yeah. So what do you look for when you're looking to buy a book to publish?
Well, from my point of view, and this is coming from the point of view of a commercial publisher at Headline, you know, we're kind of unashamedly commercial. So, you know, somebody from Faber, let's say, would probably answer this quite differently. But for me, I first am grabbed, if I'm getting sent something from an agent, for example, it's the pitch. And I am an ex-marketeer, so I'm particularly looking for that, I think. You need to have a compelling hook. If you're talking about genre fiction, you really need to be able to have that one-line pitch and to be immediately like, oh, that sounds really good. And you get that feeling when you read it and you think, yes, I think this could be for me. And then it's just being instantly immersed for me. I want to be taken into the story straight away. And I think being able to do that is a real skill. And you just know, like I say, when you get the feeling when you see the pitch, you kind of get the feeling when you start to read as well, because you're kind of in. And then for me as well, I want to know, you know, if I'm going to be sort of seeing this author as setting them up as a career, I just want to know that they can tell a story and that they can probably do it again. Like they have that kind of, you know, you can tell that they're a natural storyteller. I think that's quite important.
Yeah.
So those are the main things for me. And you know, I think you also want something that's different from the things that you already have on your list, so that, you know, you think, okay, you know, you don't want two authors who are super similar, because you're kind of competing against yourself then. You want to know that actually, yes, that sits uniquely in that space. We can really go for it.
Yeah. So sort of curveball question here. So with all the stuff that's been talked about diversity and inclusivity, how does that play on your mind? How's that come through your mind when you are looking at submissions that you get?
Mainly that I'm not getting enough. That's the truth of it.
Yeah.
Particularly in my area, in commercial fiction and genre fiction. The thing that most plays on my mind is that we're not getting enough, and how much we need to proactively change that, whether that's whether that's through partnerships, whether that's through open submissions, whether that's actively going out and finding new voices, because the truth is that not enough is coming in via agents.
Is that changing? Hopefully,
I think it is changing. I think it is changing, and it's something that publishers and agents are so aware of.
Well, I'm asking you this as somebody, because I wrote that letter.
Yeah.
That to the publishing industry, and as my editor, I did want to say that you've always been very good to me as an editor, and my previous editors have been. I've been very fortunate. Most of my editors have been great. But since sort of like that watershed moment, I think, have you seen things getting better, do you think, or being on the inside changing, and people, rather than just talking about it, which I think people have done for years and years and years, and let's not pretend they haven't. They have talked about it, but not done anything about it. It's very easy to talk a good game,
absolutely,
but not to actually try and affect change, or to try and change things.
I completely agree, and I think that's why it was so shocking and depressing, was that that conversation has just been going around for so long. And I do feel now that people are really doing much more, rather than and having to say, no, I need to do this. No one's going to do this for me.
Yes.
So as editors individually, we are all, we have a meeting every other week, specifically actually to talk about this, to go, right, what are we actually doing?
Yes.
What individually.
That's really heartening to hear, that you decided to do something rather than waiting to come from above, as it were. That sort of like thing, to inspiration to strike, or something to.
The other thing I just wanted to say, that, I mean, we've talked about this before, but it's kind of, and also it's about, we've talked about mentorship coming up a lot, and things that are just not tangible enough, and it's kind of it's deals that you want, deals and books,
yes,
and authors on the list, and that you
want authors to submit their books. That's the thing, isn't it? And if they might not be perfect, I mean, no book is perfect when it's sent, especially debuts, and they're not perfect. So what you want is to have the opportunity to work with people, I suppose, and to help create and build an author whose career is long, not just simply,
because that's our job, after all.
Exactly. that is the job, and that is the job that people are doing, isn't it? It's one of those things. I think mentorships and all those things, all those schemes, they're great, but they don't do enough. They don't open it up enough for different people, because I never did a mentorship. I was rejected quite a lot, as we all know, but I was given an opportunity by somebody who actually saw in my work something they wanted to publish for two different people, because I've had two different chances at being published, but way back when, back in the 1800s or whatever, which is what it feels like sometimes. but yes, we want, as I said in my letter, we want equality of opportunity, the chance to get in front of the editors, you know, and not have to think that our book has to be 100% perfect. It can be 70% perfect.
Completely.
But given the chance to work with somebody who's going to make it 100% perfect.
And that's kind of partly what I was referring to earlier, because when I was saying that when I look for a kind of a good pitch and a storyteller, and that's not because I'm a cynical marketing person, even though I probably am a cynical marketing person, but it's kind of what you're saying. It's not that I don't care about the quality of the writing, of course I do, but there's work that you can do with an author to get something to where it perhaps needs to be if it's not polished enough.
Yes.
But if you can spot those things in it where you think, no, there's something in this, you know, that's kind of what I meant by that, as opposed to just marketing and not about the quality.
No, well, no, absolutely, it's not at all, is it? It is a business, but it is, if you see there's something, it's like finding that rough diamond, and you know, knowing that you can polish it up, and you can help to polish it up. You can help the person to make it what you think a good book is, or a great book is. Okay, so what can an author do to increase their chances of being published? I mean, I know lots of people are really cynical about this, and they say, you know, I mean, they're always thinking, a lot of people sort of think that there's certain things that you have to be to get published. And I'm hoping, again, that things are changing, and that's not the case. But what can you do as a person sitting at home listening to this to increase your chances of getting a publishing deal, whether you're published before or whether you're just starting out? What can you do to increase your chances of an editor picking up on your...
Yeah, I think it's good to be just generally aware of what's going on in publishing and the market, which you can do by following social media channels, for example, following publishers' social media, agents, even kind of bloggers, book bloggers. I think it's quite good to be aware of what's out there and how books are being talked about, and how perhaps what you want to write or have written might kind of fit into it, and just having that general awareness. There are quite a lot of schemes in terms of, that was also a good way to hear about them, actually, in terms of whether that's open submissions, whether that's schemes set up with partners, where, you know, not competitions, but you know what I mean, where you submit your work. And I think thinking carefully, if you are going to submit your work either to an agent or via a different scheme, it's just good to think about how you set that out if you can. And I know that's hard to know if nobody tells you, but it's just worth thinking about how you're going to grab somebody's attention when you talk about your book. And I think that's where that awareness of what else is going on in the book world might help. Because while you always want to do something different, I'm not saying that you should do something that's the same as everybody else, but just being able to pitch your book in a kind of concise, easy way will always help. I think those are the main things. Is there anything else you can think of?
I was just wondering if, so I know a lot of people say, oh, perfect for fans of such and such and such and such, and I always think, you know, perfect for fans of Dorothy Coomson. Ha 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 ha. Who are they? No, but does that sort of thing help, or does it just make you think?
I think it helps. I think try and be, if you're going to do that, and I say this to editors as well going into acquisitions meetings, if you're going to do that, just make sure it's specific enough. And, you know, if you're going to use an internationally best-selling author, just make sure it's clear why, because it's a very easy comp to use, and lots of people use various names. And so it's just good to think about, why am I saying that? What is it about it that makes me think of that author? I mean, I think as an industry, I think part of the problem is our reliance on comps and what's gone before. And actually, it would be nice if we weren't so reliant on comping to other authors and titles.
Yeah.
But haven't
You mean
cracked
comparing?
that yet.
You mean comparing?
Yeah.
Not, when you say comps,
Sorry,
I was
I'm sorry.
thinking, what does that mean?
That's such a publishing thing, isn't it? That you can tell how much we talk about comps in a meeting, and no one has any clue what that means outside of that meeting.
Yes. So comparing to other
exactly,
people. Yes.
exactly. Comparisons.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you want to have somebody who's as successful as someone who's gone before, but you want them to do something different. So
exactly.
it's like, I remember I read somebody had written something along that, I can't remember who it was, so I apologize to that person. I'm not trying to steal your thunder or your words, but I when they said it didn't stick in my mind as publishing is a real risk-taking business run by people who are very risk averse. So you have to take a gamble on something, but you don't want to gamble, but you're not gamblers.
Totally.
So yeah, and that's what that kind of, you want somebody who's going to do something as well as that person does, but completely different as well.
Exactly.
And I suppose that's the quandary, isn't it, of publishing and pretty much everything, I suppose. So what do authors need to know about acquisition meetings?
Well, this relates, I suppose.
Yes. And what is an acquisition meeting? Because I know what they are, because I've been traditionally published, but what is an acquisition meeting?
An acquisition meeting is generally the meeting where the different teams get together, usually.
And teams in respect, what do you mean by the different? See, I'm trying to break this down.
This is good. Do
have
ask
an
questions
idea.
that don't work. So normally, in my experience, it's usually the managing director of the company who would run an acquisition meeting, which is essentially the meeting where you decide what books you're going to buy. That's put simply.
Okay.
So then the different departments, editorial, sales department, very important in that meeting, marketing department, publicity department, and production and art. So the key people in those departments will come together in that meeting and a kind of pitch for a new project. So if there's a new book that has come in, probably from an agent, not necessarily from an agent, has come into an editor, and an editor's gone, right, yes, I love this. This is how I think I'd publish it. Brilliant, I want to go for it. They will then put that project forward to that kind of team of people in the acquisition meeting. And essentially, in that meeting, it's our responsibility to decide the commercial value of that particular book or project to us as a company. So different companies, as I said earlier, will view something in a completely different way. There's lots of context to how we might view something, depending on what else we're publishing, depending on, the type of campaign we'll put behind it. And in that meeting, we'll discuss, where does the book kind of sit in the market? So actually comparisons are often relevant to that. Yes. But they shouldn't be. I don't think one should wholly rely on what's gone before. What retailers do we think it might sell in? So sometimes you'll have something that will be strong in ebook. Sometimes you'd have a supermarket book, or think that you'd pitch to supermarkets to stock it. Sometimes something might be more Waterstone. Sometimes something might be more Amazon. So that's what we discuss, and we have to do that in order to work out how many copies we think we could sell, which is by no means an exact art. And it's based on all those different things, and different publishers will value things in a different way because of all the other things that are going on for them. And so our sales director is very important in that process, in terms of working out, okay, I think based on this and where we think it can sell, this is where we're going to kind of put our marker. So it's probably our most important meeting, really. And we all, they're great discussions often, and it's lovely if everybody really loves something and talks about it very passionately. and that's great. We don't tend to spend too long on that because it's about, you know, it's kind of like you were saying earlier, it is a business and we have to kind of decide, you know, our feelings for the book aside, what do we genuinely think we can do with it?
How many books do you have at each meeting, and how often do you have
So
these
it's
meetings?
once a week. And so we bring the minutes to each meeting. So we'll still discuss ongoing books to see how those negotiations are going, because sometimes it will take a little while if you're negotiating with an agent on a book, sometimes it will take a bit of time. Sometimes there's an auction. Sometimes it's very straightforward. It just depends. And
how does the auction work? Sorry, just quick aside. How does an auction work?
So usually, if an agent knows that they have quite a bit of interest, so they might have got a few different editors saying to them, "I love this. I'm taking it through my acquisitions meeting," and they think, "Okay, I know that I'm going to get a few offers." They would normally set a deadline whereby anyone who's interested gets their first offer in. And then they can choose how they play it from that moment on, and how many rounds they might have in an auction. Whether they drop people out of the auction by setting targets that each editor has to meet in each round of the auction. When they say, right, it's time for best bids, kind of like if you're buying a house.
Yes. But is it just purely money, or is it?
No, that's a good
money.
That's a good point, actually. That makes it sound like it's just about the money, and it isn't, because, you know, an agent will often have an idea of somebody who would, you know, either an editor who's made a brilliant connection with the author. It could be that someone's really impressed with a marketing idea. It could be anything. Or, you know, perhaps the author just got a really good feeling from a certain team, because often in an auction situation you would often meet the author so that the author could see the team that they were going with, which is virtual now, obviously.
Yeah. I suppose it can happen more often now, can't it? Because it's virtual.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So in the acquisitions meeting, there's some that's ongoing and there's some that's new books that are being discussed. So I'm trying to be polyamorous about this, I suppose. But, you know, if you get to the acquisition meeting, that's a big deal.
That's great. Yeah, that's great, because, and also I should say, I'm making it sound like very, you know, challenging, but we want to publish books, and we want to publish more books. And I should also say that we don't do everything in the same format. So sometimes something will be published in hardback, but sometimes it won't be. Sometimes the ebook is the main format. Not everything is published in audio. So there's lots of flexibility, and as I said earlier, it's not one size fits all. And so there's lots of different ways to make up a publishing list that isn't, you know, the same for each book, which is what makes it interesting as well.
That's changed a lot, hasn't it? Since, because before, when I was first published, it was mainly you were hardback or paperback, and then that was it, and the ebook came out. And now I suppose there's more opportunities for authors, because if you're not hung up, say, on just being published in hardback, then there are opportunities to be published in ebook, and maybe you're an ebook author, or even maybe you're an ebook author first,
definitely, and then you might
books down the line.
Exactly.
It's so I suppose in that respect, you shouldn't get hung up on the acquisition, on the fact that you're not going to be a hardback person like that author whose career you want as well, I suppose.
And Headline's quite a strong digital publisher, so, you know, an author might go through the acquisition process and think, right, well, I've got Headliners saying they're going to do, you know, I don't know, publish an early ebook, for example, and this publisher over here is saying, oh, we want to do it in hardback, and then you can kind of decide, actually, what do I think's best as an author.
Yeah. So, but getting to an acquisitions meeting with your book is
definitely
great.
Good.
But obviously, I mean, that's not going to pretend it's not really heartbreaking when someone says, actually, no, we can't afford, or we don't want this book at that time. Can we just give people a bit of hope that it's not all
It's
bad?
not at all. And actually, you know, and I was going to say that situation is heartbreaking for the editor as well, because, you know, the other thing to know is that the editor who's going into that meeting is totally championing you. And the fact that they've even taken it to the meeting is kind of, you know, bearing in mind, get submissions all the time, you know, but if they've picked that one out and they're championing it, then that's a really good thing. And the book you've written is connecting. So, you know, that's the main thing to take from that. It's a really good thing to happen. And as I say, we want to publish books and more books.
Yes.
So
well, you see, as I say to people ask me what to do, you know, once they've sent the book off, and I always say get on with the next one, because very few publishers just want you to be a one book author.
Definitely.
Do they want you to write lots of books. So you need to kind of almost move on from that book, because that could become your second book to be published.
Absolutely. And if you've got a strong idea for it, so if we're going to buy, let's say, 2 books from an author rather than one, we would want to know what that book's going to be and that they've got an idea for it. And you know, so I think your advice is really sound on that.
Okay, so I think we've done all we can do about acquisition meetings. Is there anything else? I don't think
they
so.
are fun. They are fun meetings. That makes it sound like
I was going to say they sound quite scary.
Very nice. And we want things to go through. It's not, you know.
Yeah. So do you have pitch battles? I'm just imagining people standing on the table going, "I'm having it." You can't stop me.
I love it.
So anyway, moving on. I know you say you didn't answer that question, actually. Did you just kind of just
it? I don't quite do that. Not everyone agrees all the time. I will say that.
What do you think an author could do to improve the relationship between them and the publisher? Because I know it doesn't always go right and it doesn't always go smoothly. And, you know, I've been very fortunate with the people I've worked with. I am, yes, I can be forthright. As somebody told me, they think I've had a lot of success because I'm very good at standing up for myself. I know what they meant by that. What they really meant by that. But what can you do? Because I am one of those people, I like to get involved with everything. I know some authors don't. Some authors just want to submit their book and then just
I think
away.
That's the interesting thing, is that everybody approaches things differently and everybody feels differently about things and has different trigger points to what either upsets them or makes them happy about something. And I think it's interesting with you and saying your, you know, the involvement, but I think what works about that is that it's a team, and while, you know, you're the one who's put blood, sweat and tears into writing the book, so it's yours, but also, you know, it feels that because you approach your writing career as a job and you take it very seriously, it's also, we're a team, and therefore if something goes wrong, we're both, you know, that, you know, I'm kind of almost as upset about it as you are, and that that, you know, your disappointment is my disappointment, or your, you know, or conversely, when something goes right, it just, you know, it feels so good. So I think if you can get to that point where you feel like you're working as a team together, because I think one thing that I would say, if you're thinking about what would you say to authors, is that we do really want all our books to sell. We really want our books to sell, because, you know, for both of us, we need them to sell as a business anyway, but also your editor should usually be an absolute passionate champion of your books and your writing as well. And so everybody really wants that to work. And I think if it's not working, then I think it's always good to say something, and just to be able to have that kind of honest communication if things aren't quite right, because everybody deals with things differently. Some people like lots of information, some people like hardly any information at all. You know, there are lots of examples I could think of where people differ, and so we don't always get it right. So I think it's always good to say if it's kind of not working for you, because we should be able to provide a bespoke approach to each author.
One of the things I always say when I'm going to work with people, I need to know everything. I need to know what's going on, because if something's got my name on it, I need to know what's going on with it and what's being said and what's being done.
Definitely.
Partly because I want, I want to know what's been said in my name and done in my name, but also, because I'm interested. It is part of what I do, and I am interested. But like I say, other people don't want to know. They just want to know the good stuff, and all the bad stuff, they want that to be kept away from them. So do you think at the start of a working relationship, you should be very clear about what it is you want from that working relationship?
Yes, and I think we don't do that enough. I think we should be doing that more, and just being more open about that. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget how much you don't necessarily know about the publishing industry or how it works before you've had a book published. And I think sometimes we're guilty of just sort of not thinking to sort of either explain something or just to go, okay, this is the process and this is exactly what's going to happen now. This is when you should expect to hear from me. This is when, because otherwise I think if you're an author and you're usually working from home, or very often working from home, and you're kind of getting on things your end, if you don't hear anything, I think silence is the worst thing, because you don't know what's going on. And I think so that communication is just so key.
So obviously you can put the caveat with any conversation you have that things might change. You might want to know less, you might not want to know more as time goes on. But I think being honest and open is a good way of going into anything, I suppose, but definitely, particularly with working with an editor.
I think so, and I think if publishers don't, there's probably people listening to this going, "No, don't do this, Jen." But if publishers don't take seriously what their author thinks, I think that's not only is it a disservice to them, but actually it's just a bit, an author knows their work and their readers better than anyone else, I would say. So I think their opinion, or whatever you want to call it, is as valuable, probably more valuable than anybody else's. And we might not always agree. You and I don't always agree on what.
No.
Whether it's a title or whatever, and that's that's fine. But we can feel that we can say to each other, actually, I think you're wrong.
I'm wrong.
No. Because also I think I'm not doing you a service if I kind of, conversely, if I was just to say, oh yes, okay, we'll just do whatever you want, I'm not doing you a service either. If I think actually I'm not sure that's going to work, I want to say to you, and you might still say that's fine, but I'd like to try it, which is fine. But otherwise I haven't really done my job.
But you also know that I'll always be there with the "I told you so."
Yes.
Because that's pretty much, I'm pretty much.
You are usually right. I mean, I have to say this.
One of the things I think you have to, as an author, you have to kind of accept that people are going to not always agree with you or not do what you think they should be doing. And also accept that someone else knows that part of the business better than you do. And you don't see everything. Coming to it as an author and or reader, you don't always see the important conversations and things that are going on behind the scenes. So good communication is key, I think. But it's hard though, isn't it? Because it takes so long to get published sometimes that you kind of just end up not wanting to say anything to rock the boat, do you?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's part of it. And I think on the editor side, obviously authors deal with other people than just the editor, but it's always that balance between, you want to show somebody something that you're happy with. So let's say you're sending a cover for approval, and this is, by the way, does not, we have our own way of working with that, but you want it to be good enough and you want to be happy with it before you send something, but without being right, well, this is a fait accompli and you don't have an opinion. It's a very hard balance that to strike, I think, particularly if you don't know each other all that well yet. and know how you like to communicate. That's always a hard one, I think.
Well, thank you so much, Jim.
Yeah, that was fun.
Thanks for joining me, Dorothy Coomson, today on the Happy Author podcast. I hope my chat with Jennifer Doyle, Fiction Publishing Director of Headline Books, was helpful to you on your writing journey. Keep writing, keep reading, keep happy. Talk to you soon. Bye.